This is a decade trend. I think it starts more fundamentally around the industry had done a poor job at helping folks understand the impact of their work, putting them into work that is compelling, having the right balance, and compensation had stayed flat as compared against other high demand jobs like consulting or investment banking. You're working almost similar hours, but maybe without similar pay. And so branding, a culture, a pay, kind of problem that's now emerging. And then as it comes to, AI and automation, it's certainly being welcomed by the industry. It has to get there to be part of the solution because the gap is so big. We're big on trying to make it a compelling opportunity for those in the industry and even really evangelize it to the next generation and help them understand how impactful their work is. But even as people potentially staying or returning to the industry, like the automation is going to have to be there for us to continue to perform the work we need to do.
Reyes, welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged.
Yeah, Jeff, awesome to be here for sure.
For people that don't know, let's start from the top and tell me a little bit about Platform.
Yeah, I mean, in its kind of simplest description, we're essentially a centralized platform that allows what I would call boutique CPA firms to evolve in what is a very challenging environment for them right now. Some of the key things that we focus on is really helping retiring or aging partners kind of transition their firm to the next generation. We're helping solve a lot of the staffing challenges that each of these firms face. A big part of our work is around technology adoption and evolution within the space as well. And then lastly, allowing these boutique firms to really become full service. So we will acquire these boutique firms, bring them into our network and our platform, our collective, if you will, and then really help prepare and run a firm that is really modern and next generation.
So, how did you get into this, and why Platform for you? What's the background story to this?
I think it's a pretty cool story, actually. It really goes back all the way to my grandfather. So, he was, an immigrant to the U.S. His family were farmers and railroad workers, and he grew up on the west side of Salt Lake City, Utah, where he got a little bit of education. He was one of the first in his family to go to college, learned to speak English, and then worked at a cement plant. And there at the cement plant, he had many colleagues and he had learned how to do his own tax return. And so then he started doing them for friends, quite literally at the kitchen table. I always tell the story, it was around a 6-pack of beer. And it was really my grandmother who would hit them up for the $20 as they went out the door. So, that small collection of clients then, became kind of the basis that my dad founded one of these boutique firms on. It was a firm that was, his sustaining work for 30 years, and that was a firm that I grew up inside, so I saw kind of very firsthand what these firms meant to clients and community, and also to the teams that were servicing them. I did spend some time away at a couple of larger financial institutions, a couple of years with Goldman Sachs, did an MBA, and then a couple of years with Credit Suisse. And then really just ultimately saw what I think is a huge opportunity to make sure that these firms are preserved and able to continue on, because I think they play a really critical part of like local ecosystems and local economies.
So your strategy really is you've created a full service firm integrated with technology, and you're finding these firms that are kind of nearing the partners kind of end of their working careers, and they're trying to probably think about what they want to do with this, if they give it to junior partners or what that might look like. And you guys are kind of coming in and acquiring those firms and leveraging what you've built to empower them. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a great summary. I would say what's interesting is as we've been in the space now for almost a decade, is that we're also seeing the emergence of younger partner-led firms looking for a solution. Right, these
Mm.
problems and challenges that they face are um, so pervasive and they're so deep that they too, even if they're 20 years out potentially from a transition, they're looking for solutions. So early on, it was about retiring, helping retiring partners transition. But we've evolved as the market's evolved. And now we have firms that join us that even have, younger partners that have a lot of runway ahead of them because the opportunity to kind of grow their firm and evolve their firm is so compelling, and they're looking for partners to do that.
So they actually are not fully selling their firm, or are they selling their firm and they're part of the greater platform?
Yeah, they're selling the firm, becoming part of the greater platform, and then, just kind of the 1 plus 1 equals 3, just
Right.
a lot of synergy. I always talk about being able to, kind of tilt the slope, right? So these firms generally are great, well-run firms. They're on a great trajectory. And so
Yeah.
how do we kind of tilt that slope so that they can go further and faster with us and the
Yeah.
platform that we've built?
I love that tilt to slope. I haven't heard
Yeah.
that phrase. I don't know
Yeah.
if you just made that up. I don't know if that's something you
I
always say, but I like that.
Sure, sure, yeah. I think I made it up. You know how those things go. Sometimes you like by osmosis pick things up, but it's the
Right.
best description I've come up with.
Yeah, I like that. Now, uh, with this, like there has to be something going on in the market. And this is from my outside of accounting world, but I know that I've transitioned from my father's accountant
Yep.
that I used forever to a business accountant that we have that now we transition to another accounting firm. But yeah, honestly, I don't see a lot of accountants my age in these
Right.
firms, and like the firms that we kind of bounced around to recently. I still see file cabinets and
Sure.
older partners. Is there less talent coming into the market around CPAs? Is there less people graduating with that degree? I mean, what's the market look like for that?
Yeah, and that's one of the main drivers of this consolidation. And by the way, that consolidation is really happening, top to bottom, right? So I think it's six or seven, soon to probably be 10 of the top 25 are now, private equity backed, firms. Consolidations happening at the very top, all the way to this, kind of boutique end of the market where we are. And a big driver of that has been a massive staffing crunch, and that's been driven by a number of things. There's been, this demographic shift that I've alluded to. There's been a mass exodus. Several 100,000 people left public accounting over the last 4 to 5 years to go into industry and or leave, kind of accounting altogether. And then you also have a massive decline in new graduation rates as folks are, tilting towards technology and tech jobs, product management jobs. Finance has stayed strong, so you still see a lot of folks going into finance, traditional kind of investment banking pathways and things. But accounting has been significantly down in terms of new graduates over the last, really decade.
Is that partly just for the fact that the writing's on the wall with technology and how you know technology is going to probably fill a big gap in some of the work that accountants used to do? Is that, part of not seeing a career towards that anymore? And I mean, and I guess the second question is technology filling this gap?
Yeah. So two big questions there. I think on the first one, I don't know, at least at the start of it, right, 10 years ago, because this is a decade plus trend. So this
Right.
isn't something that's in the last couple of years as large language models and AI and automation have really become a hot topic, and we've seen a clear pathway to that. I think it starts more fundamentally around, the industry had done a poor job at helping, folks understand the impact of their work, putting them into work that is compelling, having the right balance, and candidly also compensation. Compensation had stayed flat as you compare it against other high demand jobs like consulting or investment banking. You're working almost similar hours, but maybe without the similar pay. And so I think that there's a kind of a branding, a culture, a pay, kind of problem that's like now emerging.
Yeah.
And having to be solved. And then, as it comes to, AI and automation, it, it's certainly being welcomed by the industry. I mean, we're excited for the developments. It has to get there,
Right.
to be part of the solution because the gap is so big. We're big on trying to make it a compelling opportunity for those in the industry and even really evangelize it to the next generation and help them understand how impactful their work is. Again, get them the right working environment, help them feel energized around what I think is the most compelling time to be in the industry. But even as you get kind of graduation rates up and people potentially staying or returning to the industry, like the automation is going to have to be there for us to continue to perform the work we need to do.
Yeah. And what's that look like from a technology, or maybe explain it in the way of like full service? What's full service when it comes to accounting? Like, how have you guys developed your operating model of that?
Yeah, so from a full service, so our core customer is really kind of a Main Street SMB, right? So these are folks who are servicing businesses that might be a sole proprietor up to several hundred employees, maybe a couple hundred million in revenue at its largest, but also maybe 2 million at its at the low end. And so, we're doing, tax compliance work for them. So the filing of tax returns, tax planning, et cetera. We would do full source, kind of outsourced accounting work, what we call client accounting services or CAS. We'll do outsourced CFO as well. And then we also have an advisory arm on the wealth management side, and then also an ERP, which is helps these firms transition from a QuickBooks or a Xero to an Acumatica or a Sage. So when we think about full service, it's really owning the full relationship with the client in a unified way that enhances that experience for them and gets all of the pieces of the puzzle in one place so that the advisory part of what we do can really lead the engagement and lead the relationship.
That's really interesting. And how many acquisitions have you guys done so far?
Just under 50 in the last, about 9.5 years. So it's been a ride.
That's crazy. That's a lot.
That is a lot for sure. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it, again, just tells you something around what's going on in the space and how much we've tapped into the need, that these firms have.
What's the acquisition strategy like? What are you guys looking for? And then like, what's the implementation part of that? Because you must have a whole team that's doing both of those jobs, right?
That's right. Yeah, we have a full corp development M&A team, engine process, and then we also have a full kind of ops strategy integration team. So those teams sit in Salt Lake City. We have firms in 13 states, soon to be 14. But most of those folks are kind of centralized in Salt Lake. And, look, we're focused on firms that are, 2.5 million, 3 million in revenue up to about 15 million in revenue. So again, those firms that are very, localized, community driven, typically have anywhere from 2 to 4 partners, somewhere between, call it 20 to 30 up to about 100 total headcount. And we'll come in and we'll, obviously get to know them through a period of time and discussion, help, develop a cohesive, collaborative strategy for what the future looks like, make the acquisition. And then it's really a SWAT team of ops analysts and managers who come in and do the blocking and tackling of getting these firms integrated onto our systems, platforms. The thing that makes us a little bit unique is that we still afford a great deal of autonomy to these local firms. Again, I think that's what makes them special. And so there's this balance between standardization as well as kind of letting these firms, which are great firms, again, if we did nothing, they're great firms, but letting them kind of be and remain autonomous. And so striking that balance is a big conversation that we have constantly, and I think that we do that in a really unique way. There's now emerged several other active acquirers and consolidators. It's almost crowded at this point.
Right.
But we've been able to maintain kind of this ethos around boutique, allowing them to keep their identity in a lot of ways while still again evolving and getting better.
Any lessons learned on acquiring companies that you probably didn't see
Oh,
going into it?
sure. I mean, the list probably would take up an hour. Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that comes to mind, honestly, and it seems like such a no brainer, but when you are sitting in front of what is a really big opportunity, given just the sheer number of firms and what's available, in the market, is really getting to a core philosophical alignment and making sure that is there, because that's going to allow you to really work through any of the challenges. Like, without question, something will go off script. Again, we've
Right.
done this almost 50 times. We have the playbook, we have the checklist, we have everything, and we are still finding new surprises in an acquisition, and not all of those bad per se, and some of those, most of them well outside of either party's control. But what you can expect is that something will pop up, and so if you have that deep belief that you're the right partner for each other, and that's been vetted and had really transparent conversations at the beginning as to what expectations are through the process, post close, how you see the world, if you will, then those are pretty easy to work through. I found early on, in a handful of the acquisitions that we did, 16 and 17, 2016 and 2017, where that wasn't present. Those were just really, really challenging and difficult.
Right. When you said like 2 to 15 million, have you gone above that or below that and realized that's not your sweet spot?
Yeah, not above it, but we have done a handful of deals below it, early on. Again, we kind of evolved in terms of the what we think the right size of firm is, and we will do below, kind of below the 2.5 million, if we're already in a market. So, again, we look at those deals a little bit differently, because they are different firms. They tend to
Mm.
be candidly much more like my dad's, right? Like, that was the profile that my dad's firm was, and so that's where we started, and then have evolved, since. And we're open to something above the 15 million for the right fit. We've looked at a handful of those, have not pulled the trigger on anything, but if the right firm comes along with the right partner group, the right philosophy, we're of a size certainly that we could, do that deal, and I think help those types of firms. But it would still have to fit within some of our core, ethos.
Yeah. It's interesting. A lot of the companies that I work with, and I do a lot of work when they do acquire companies because they're doing a lot of integration of these two companies. But typically it's they're acquiring a company that's providing some, maybe additional piece of software or a piece of the market that they haven't really gone after, to give them kind of a bigger position. You're acquiring like right in the sweet spot of things that you already do to provide them more. I think that's really unique and, a
Yeah.
different thing because I think oftentimes I'm sitting in, doing an annual session or quarterly session, and we have the new founder that's in there as well. And we're looking at, what's most important next 90 days for this company and what this integration look like. And for them, it's, they don't have a routine around it, right? Maybe they do a acquisition. A lot of the companies I work with, maybe for about 5 years, maybe do a few acquisitions along
Right.
the way. Like
Yeah.
acquisition for you guys is part of your operating model. It's a
Yeah.
piece of what you do day in and day out, and I would guess that you're just getting better and better at it.
We really are, and that is a good point, and we've had 9 years to kind of build that muscle, right? And so the engine, from sourcing to screening to conversations to execution of the deal to then flipping on the integration, switch and bringing in the ops team, is really systematic, at this point, and we just continue to refine it and get better, and we also take great care. And I will say something that I preach all the time is helping our team really understand the how important this transaction is to the partner groups, right? Often,
Right.
again, these are folks who have spent 30 years building their firm. They've been a lot of sacrifices. I know my dad sacrificed a lot of baseball games and a lot of, events and things like that to meet the needs and demands that, the tax deadlines require. and that was the biggest transaction of his life.
Right.
And so I think, although we do this kind of quote every day, we need to always keep in mind, for the sellers that this is maybe a few will do it twice, but most are only doing it one time, and we need to treat it that way with a lot of care.
I'd love to get into a little bit about, like, the technology that you're using and that you see coming this way. Obviously, everyone's talking about AI, but, I mean, there's a lot of software, you know, in the last 10 years that have come along that's really helped
Mhm.
accounting firms besides, like,
Absolutely.
what people are doing with the AI stuff
Just
right now,
grow.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so can you tell me a little bit about, like, what have you seen, what have you guys used to, like, really kinda up the ante when it comes to accounting with technology?
Yeah, I mean, right off the top, we've seen massive VC investment into what I would call accounting tech. And these are just the core tools that these firms use. And a lot of it is bringing enterprise level capability, tools and systems that have existed in large firms down, all the way to the mid market, again, to boutique and even to kind of sole proprietor firms. And that's everything from practice management tools to document, management systems to, uh, general data analytics. It's, out of the box kind of packaging for those things. Those didn't exist, certainly when I was a kid at my dad's firm. And then even when we started, 10 years ago, a lot of those were just emerging or hadn't emerged yet. So in just the fundamental kind of systems, there's been, big investment, and then you start to see, a lot of this AI investment happening now. And I would make the distinction that from a technology and automation standpoint and deployment of AI, and there are really kind of two avenues by which that happens. One is on the operational side of the firm, right? So again, that is how you engage with a client, ingest documents, communicate back, some things around, again, data or portals, practice management tools. There's a lot, that can happen there that will be massively accretive to the process. And then you have, the actual production function of doing the accounting work, right? Of the blocking and tackling of general ledger work, tax work, et cetera. I see, most of the evolution still is on the operational side of the firm. What makes that challenging though is that there is, within within the tech stack of these firms, they're very old. A lot of the production tools for the producing the tax return are the code's 60 years old, right? So it's hard to layer in and plug in, if you will, to those. And it's highly fragmented, right? So you have a lot of different point solutions. There's a handful of big names who are who have tried and attempted to create kind of full end-to-end ecosystems, when it comes to tax or outsourced accounting. But by and large, the industry is still using a fragmented technology stack, and so it makes it very hard to, actually move the needle with new tools. But it's happening. It's certainly not going to be overnight. But I see, the biggest movement and the biggest steps happening more on just firm management and the operational side of the firm than I do on the actual work production side.
That makes a lot of sense. How do you guys structure yourself and, like, what's your leadership team and management team look like?
Yeah, I mean, we very much think about ourselves as an ecosystem and a true platform. And so our job is to facilitate, best practices, information, collaboration across like our network of firms, right? And so the way that we're structured, our centralized team is about call it 70 individuals. We're providing full functionality in HR benefits administration, finance and accounting, planning, budgeting, reporting, the ability again, kind of to run. We have an internal consulting process that we run on every firm that comes in the door, that really outlines and looks at 8 core areas of the firm, and then creates initiatives. And then the nice thing is we have the operational capability to now go execute on those initiatives. And these initiatives are not things that are overly novel. They're things that the partners themselves kind of in their core kind of know.
Mm.
We can bring a lot of visibility to it through data and through just calling it out and kind of putting it on a page, if you will. But when you're in a kind of seller doer model that accounting has been for, since its inception, right? Where, the partners who are managing the firm are also engaging with clients and have a client responsibility, it's really hard to then go make changes and drive improvement and kind of strategic initiatives. And so our process really pulls those out from them and collaborates with them to create them. Again, they're things that they intuitively already know need to be done. And then we have, an ops team of 20 professionals from analyst to, director who then can go execute on those things. And then, aside from that, we're providing all of the, cybersecurity operations, system administration. So we are functioning almost like an MSP to our offices. So all of that core support work happens, through the centralized team. And then those teams on the ground at the individual unit level are able to focus on client service, retaining again that like white glove level service those clients are used to, and really just thrive and evolve.
I'd love to get into a little like lessons learned that you had over this. I mean, because what you guys are doing, I think, is kind of pretty unique, and there has to be some lessons learned that have come along the way that you've learned because I don't think there's a roadmap for what you guys have been doing.
No, I mean, again, I would argue we were probably the first to do it in the space. Again, a lot of names now. Deals are competitive, and the nice thing is it's a big market, and this is something that the industry needs. So I'm just happy to see the industry continue to evolve, and we collaborate with a lot of those names. That would be, quote, competition, if you will, because I think that we all win as we
Right.
go out and do this work. In terms of lessons learned, I mean, again, yeah, to think about things that might be broadly applicable, I think one of the things that I've really spent a lot of time thinking about is this trade off between optimization and speed. And, as you are growing a company quickly, there's always this decision of like, well, how much do you put the gas on and really go for it? And how much do you refine and optimize? And I think that, we have certainly pushed the envelope on speed, but have also made a very conscious decision to not be too aggressive so that we can build something that's enduring and kind of fundamentally sound. And so I think that, in that situation, it just forces you to be really judicious about the things that you focus on and that matter, right? Because there are a lot of things that probably don't move the needle, if you will, that you could kind of perfect, and those we don't. And then there are those things that really do move the needle, and those are the things you should spend time on, even if it comes at the expense of one or two more acquisitions or some type of growth. And so we have kind of scaled, in step functions, right? Where first year we did one acquisition, then we did two, and then we did four, and then we kind of stayed at four for a year or two, or after that, and then have kind of accelerated out. And every year there's more opportunity out there than we bring onto the platform, and that's a conscious decision to strike that balance between optimization and speed. Um,
Was there ever a time you went a little too fast?
yeah, I would say, if you ask my team, they probably think maybe more than once, but I
Every
would
year.
probably yeah, every year, yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would, pinpoint a specific year, but there are elements or projects, right? And as a CEO, I've learned also what the, um, kind of the digestion capability of the organization is, right? And that's changed over time as we scaled and grown. Um, but there were times where it was just too many initiatives, right? And things that we thought, I felt an urgency to go out and get done. And then stuff ends up kind of being partially done, half baked, builds a lot of frustration, and actually can be a real hit to morale. And I've been forced to then kind of take a step back and say, okay, I really got to trim these initiatives up. So there's certainly been two or three phases over the last decade, the company's growth where that's been the case. And I've got to, kind of look in the mirror and say, okay, what really matters? And that effectively is my job, right? Capital allocation and resource allocation.
Right.
And so, when I do that well, then we're moving at a good speed. Morale is high. We're actually driving stuff to completion. At times when I think it has been overly ambitious, it's had not only do you not get it done, it's actually a negative impact, right? So it's not
Right.
like you're even just staying neutral. It actually can be negative to the organization.
100%. Most of my work is initiatives or helping teams define what those are. I call them
Okay.
objectives, but we like to map
Yep.
it backwards from what are the objectives 3 years out, 1 year out, and then
Yep.
90-day objectives to drive us.
So we use the 3-1-Q too.
Yeah. And
So 1Q. So I should say because not another number in there. But yeah.
yeah, so I like the idea of like reverse engineering where you want to go. And obviously that 3 year is going to change. That 1 year,
Yeah.
there'll be some changes to that. And then the 90 days is really about like what are the most important objectives that we need to accomplish this quarter to get ourselves to that 1 year. And I
Yep.
think every quarter you can look back what worked, what didn't work, how far did we get, do a retroactive on that, have the right conversations, and then remap that 1 year again to make sure it's appropriate. So we're aiming at the right things. I see a lot of teams don't reverse engineer. They throw some
Yep.
numbers out there and then the team runs, but they don't really have any sort of system to know if they're actually gaining progress on those things
Yeah.
or if they're
Yeah.
the right things in the first place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then oftentimes some of the easy stuff that might have been the wrong stuff, people are still chasing because they never re-looked at it, you know?
Right, right. And I love that at the end of the 90, you can very clearly see, like, did we accomplish this or not, right? And
Right.
and when, because, oftentimes on those things that are kinda 3-1, to your point, you feel like you're chasing them and you're running hard at it, but people are kinda like, I don't even really know where we stand, and that again can, when you kinda check stuff off the list, so to speak, and you're like,
Yep.
"Wow, we just executed, like, hard in these 90 days, check these things off, look at what we've done," the boost that comes from that, and then as that compounds over time, and you look back a year later, now you're like, "Wow, we really ran, a tight race this last year and got a lot of stuff done," and it's quantifiable and you can see it and people feel it. It's
Mm.
really powerful.
Yeah. One of the things that a lot of teams don't do is once they set those objectives for that quarter is to actually have the conversation about how are we actually going to get this done.
Yep.
Now, like in
Yep.
OKR speak, those are objectives. Then you'd create key results that would measure your progress towards those objectives. But even using just OKRs in that format doesn't work a lot of times with the clients that I've
Mhm.
worked with because
Mhm.
those things that you're measuring, you're still missing that conversation about like, what do we need to do and who's going to do it? And when's that going to get done? And,
Right.
like, in a lot of
Right.
teams that are cross-functional, like,
Yep.
sometimes this objective looks like it's maybe it's a product thing or an engineering thing or a sales thing, but the people that need to get things done to accomplish that could be all different people within the organization or within those
Mhm.
functional areas. If
Mhm.
you don't have that conversation, that's where things get stuck. And then
Yeah.
if you don't have that
Yeah.
weekly meeting or every other week meeting to talk about those things, you won't really bring to surface that these things are stuck or something's getting in the way. And I
Yeah.
think that's what drives most CEOs crazy, and they feel like they're zooming in, zooming out, solving problems. They don't
Right.
have visibility,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
their teams don't have visibility. And I think, especially like in your case, what you're doing, which is there's no roadmap, and like teams that I typically work with, there's no roadmap that are highly cross functional. Those functional teams need to know what everybody else is doing because everything is tied up together. And
Yep.
so unless you
Yep.
define what we need to do, who's gonna do it, when it's gonna get done by, and pulse on that, it's a lot of, like, unknown, I think, and I
Right.
think I love that you used, like, the idea of, like, you're doing resource capital. Like, where am I putting money and time of
Mhm.
my people? A lot of
Mhm.
people don't think of it like that, and I think CEO's
Sure.
job is an investor. Where am I
Yeah.
investing my team's time, my
100%.
team's
Yep.
capital? And
Yep.
they need to have visibility to, like, accomplish that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, and I will say that that was probably one of the most challenging inflection points for our organization when we moved from, kind of heads of different segments that by and large were individual contributors, and the size of the organization allowed them to kind of stay within their lane. There was enough trust and autonomy that they could just kind of contribute individually to their function and get the job done. The minute we became kind of a true cross-function need for collaboration, I found that, and I view, kind of in the similar vein, my job is to facilitate that and to ask the question, have you talked to ops? Have you talked to human
Right.
resources? Have you talked to finance? Do you have buy-in from that? How are you going to get that? Um, which is, you know, when you've kind of started as a 6-person organization, it feels almost like overkill and too corporate, right?
Yep.
But it's just necessary for the maturation of the org. And I think that we found that was really challenging for us. I think we're in a great spot now, and we do that through some pretty deliberate set methods, but also just generally kind of ingraining that into the culture. And I think a lot of that comes, top down from the CEO, just asking that question, or just like,
Right.
this sounds great. Have you considered, X, Y, and Z's input? And do you have buy-in from them? And what might be their frictions? You got to go find that out.
Totally right. I think there's a balance of finding the systems and methods at different stages. I always find companies start to use peak around 20 to like 500 employees. The fact that once you get to about 20, you can't be the system anymore, because I think
That's right. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's what it is. It's
yeah,
like you're the
yeah,
system. Like, did you talk to ops and sales? Did you talk?
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you have to like
When you're 20 or less than 20, that's the same person.
yeah, right. But then once you become like a team of teams, like you have to
Yeah,
employ some
yeah,
sort of system. I call it an operating system to allow
yep,
you to you know define what these things are and look at it quarterly and define who's going to do it, when it's going to get done by, pulse on it. Um, then you have that full communication. I think the role of the CEO now is have the vision, but I think that's vision forward and vision in the organization,
mhm,
and allow
mhm,
your team to have that vision. Then they can
mhm,
work better together. It's kind of like organs
yeah,
on the body, like every functional
yep,
area, every organ in the body needs to be communicating, and they're all
yep,
important.
yep,
Get rid of
100%.
the heart, it's not going to work very well.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a great analogy. Yeah.
And I love the fact that, like, as entrepreneurs and founders and CEOs, like, you just kind of go through that process and you eventually have to figure it out or you fail. And it seems like you guys really kind of figured it out and created your own model. And it looks like it's working really well for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, we feel fortunate in some ways, on the note of just, always getting better. Feels like we're just getting started, right? I think the rest of the world has kind of been turned on to the amazing opportunity, and I think that, we want to continue to be an industry leader and get better. And it feels like, yeah, we've got some things figured out now. Like, let's go.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I've peppered you with a ton of questions. I always like to leave the guest, allow them to ask me a question. So if you have a question for me, shoot, and then I'm going to give you my final question.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's around. You answered some of it, which was around kind of cross function collaboration. I think, what would you say is the most critical job of someone who again, or I guess what have you seen as the most critical challenge of someone who's like, again, been like a founder of an early stage company and has stayed in that seat for a long time. A lot of folks leave at the Series A or Series B, right? What does it take to kind of grow with the company? Because going back to slopes, what I found, and whether it's the CEO or even the head of some other department, when the company is growing this way, humans only have some.
Right.
There's a capacity at which level they can grow and adapt, right? And sometimes that doesn't match. So how have you seen, that address done well? How have you seen it when maybe a head of a division is not getting there? How you can support them and or approach that.
Wow, there's a lot in there. There's a lot in that question.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
let me start with this. I think the number one thing to be a leader, you have to really have a passion for learning. If you're not willing to learn, you're not willing to change. If you're not willing to change, you're not really going to grow. And either is the organization. So, especially if the organization's growing and you're not, that's the problem. But As a CEO founder, I think you have to really learn and focus on mastering like the art of scaling and how do we
Mhm.
scale. A lot of
Mhm.
founders early stage they see their job as creating a product when they're really building an organization.
Mhm.
And, that
Mhm.
role is corporate capital development or however you want to define what that is. Typically, the companies I'm working with, their job is to raise money and build the organization, right? So
Mhm.
I think you have to really understand what it is to scale and how to scale a team of teams. So kind of going back to that, in the first 20 employees, you can probably manage pretty much everybody or co-manage them. Once you get beyond that, now you have a team of teams. You really need to employ some sort of system, one to create alignment that we all agree where we're going, and then to define that focus. And I think that's where the challenge comes in is like they define some focus or they mandate focus without leveraging the team. But there's no alignment. And so it's really hard for them to make sure they have the right people on the team, make sure that things are getting
Mhm.
done, and
Mhm.
so alignment needs to come first. We need to agree where we're going to go first, which like when we talk about that 3, 1, and 90, like that's
Mhm.
creating those focal points of alignment. And then knowing that that's your path as a CEO, then you can say, do I have the right people to reach that goal that
To
we're
do that.
talking about? Right.
Mhm.
And some of these people might be a great fit. They might not be a culture fit. That doesn't work. Right. They have to be a culture
Mhm.
fit. They have the right, skills and experience. And then can we level them, or are they not the right person, or can we put this person somewhere else? So I think really being kind of honest with them and with the organization where you're going, if they're the right fit, if they have the right stuff, if they're learners, right?
Mhm.
I think that's the other thing. And that's really mapping. Do you have the right people? When I come into organization, I think that usually takes about a year sometimes to really make sure that we
Mhm.
have like the right people. And then once we really have the right people, then it's executing. So I think um good to great said, get the right people on the bus, and then
Yep.
then you start driving. I think the reality in the
Mm.
early stages, get the right people on the bus, but then as you scale, you have to keep on reexamining, do we have to
Mm.
drop some people off and pick some new ones up
Mhm.
to go where
Mhm.
we wanna
Yeah.
go? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest things. Now as a leader in any organization, even a functional area, I think it's the same thing. Like, you need to define and I like to do this functionally. So, like, 3 years and 1 year, like, functionally, what's the top 3 things 3 years out in sales or marketing? Or we create objectives functionally, and then we do it on an annual basis too. Now that team and that leader of sales or whatever it is can also say, "Do I have the right team members to help us get to that 3 year or that 1 year?" So you can use the same format in each of the functional or divisional areas as teams get bigger. Um, but I think going back to the main piece of the equation is like that's the art of scaling. You have to understand,
Right.
set a vision, alignment, focus. Do I have the right people? And then execute and communicate on
Yep.
that cadence. So
Yeah.
that's how
That
I
makes
see it.
sense. Yeah.
That's why I
Yeah.
wrote this book.
Right. Right.
And
Yes.
because
Yeah. All the great stuff. Yeah.
well, I think it's funny because or not funny, but like I've always been very nerdy about entrepreneurship, and I also had a dad that was a entrepreneur, and on both sides of my family or founders and entrepreneurs. Um, but I saw those same challenges in their
Mhm.
businesses, and then
Sure.
as I studied entrepreneurship and I got into the whole tech world, it's the same problem. It's the same problem, that
Yep.
most of these businesses have, and that's trying to understand how to scale, which they all wanna do.
Yep.
And there's just some simple low-hanging fruit things that people can do that can make it so much easier on them. And if they
Sure.
learn that, that's where they struggle.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Great.
Alright, so here's the final question. It's a scenario, and it's gonna be one of the toughest questions you ever asked or answered in your life, so I hope you're ready for this.
Okay.
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 And I know your team wanted all of my questions, and I gave them,
Yeah.
most of the questions, but I didn't
Some
give
of
them
'em, yeah.
I didn't give them this
This one.
last question,
This
so
one.
they're
Okay.
gonna be so upset about this.
Right.
So here's a scenario. Unfortunately, fortunately, you're trapped on a desert island the rest of your life. Now, it's a beautiful tropical island, and you have food
Okay.
and water, and you have everything you need, even healthcare. I don't know how you got it, but you have it. So
Right.
no
Okay.
worries at
All
all.
the basics are taken care of.
Right, you have all the basics, but the one thing that you don't have is entertainment. There's no entertainment on this island.
Mm.
Luckily for you, an old 80s boombox drifted ashore, and it has endless batteries. However,
Okay.
you can only bring one album, one cassette
Oof.
tape. Now, from
Gosh.
any era, it doesn't have to be 80s, even though
Yep.
I said it was an 80s boombox. One cassette tape, one album to listen to the rest of your life. What
Yeah,
would that
yeah,
be?
okay. I'm gonna need a minute because these, like, favorites, like, I'm great at, like, "Oh, this is a top 10 album for me," or a top 5, but, like, to
Right.
pinpoint the one.
You don't wanna hate it, so you might end up hating it, right?
That's true, but I'm also, like, I like, span genres, like, I'm, like, very a lot of, like, outlaw kind of country
Oh, I
to
like that.
black death metal, so, I mean, like, I'm all over the board, so could I say an artist? How about one artist?
Yeah, let's start with the artist. Maybe we can help you narrow this down. This is kinda
Okay.
like how I do objectives with teams. Yeah, let's start with
That's
the
right.
artist.
That's right. That's right. I would probably go with Me Without You
Okay.
because they're like early aughts to to just played their last show 2 years ago. Post-hardcore band, but they do a lot. I mean, they have the span
Right.
of some stuff that's heavier, stuff that's really melodic, some stuff that's like a cappella, kind of
So a good
Jake
mix.
notes singing. Yeah, a good mix.
Well, that's the first time someone's answered with that one.
Yeah. There
There
you
it's
go.
the first time I
There
heard
you
that
go.
one. And if you'd
Love it.
had to do an album, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but, like, if you had to do an album, oh, what do you think it would be?
It would probably be it would probably be Pale Horses. Yeah. Yeah.
Alright, final answer.
Yeah.
Alright, that's
Final
awesome.
answer. Yeah,
Yeah.
that honestly was the toughest question of the day because ask anyone close to me, and I usually refuse to give favorites. So you got me there.
I'm glad I got it out of you. I'm glad I got it out of you. Well, that's a great
Yeah.
answer. I love it. Well, thanks for joining me on Tech Scenes. It was great having you on.
Yes, it was awesome. It was really great. Yes, thanks so much, Jeff.